Great. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know that some of you are thinking, cybersecurity, but what has gardening really got to do with this? And I think what we need to really take a step back and realize that gardening as well as cybersecurity should be a thriving environment. We're not talking about here as threats. We're talking more about resilience and how we can imagine that we are tending to your cybersecurity as a garden. Looking at insights into planning, protecting, and removing what is no longer suiting. This approach doesn't really just respond to today's threats, but it helps build a foundation of secure future. So why? Why is cybersecurity like a garden? Well, actually, it's full of chaos. New vulnerabilities, new tooling, and new challenging can be somewhat overwhelming. Taming an overgrown garden can be something similar, where it's been neglected for many, many years. With the lens of cultivation, of not reacting, but of course understanding in front of us, we can create an environment that is more than just what we see. With this mindset shift, we can see that we are more than just firefighters. We are putting fires out, but also lasting that environment. So a bit about me. I've been in cybersecurity for the best part of a decade now, and my best thoughts have come from things that are outside the usual. The metaphor of gardening to grid is simply putting complex cybersecurity strategies and connecting them with more than just technical aspects. Principles such as nurturing for growth, pruning for efficiency, building resilience, harvesting for success, and continuous improvement. These concepts are similar to anyone that's spent time in a garden, but actually they are equal vital for us when we're looking at cybersecurity and maintaining a strong future forward. Each of these principles build together. They are holistic and they cannot be done on their own. So this would help create a more dynamic cybersecurity approach that is resilient and built for stronger over time. Our first one, we're nurturing. We're nurturing for growth in cybersecurity. So this is building a strong foundation. This is crucial for cybersecurity teams, as it is for young plants. It takes consistent care, resources, and the right environment to help teams grow effectively and resilient. So 4 essential ways to help nurture growth within your cybersecurity teams. Investing in continuous learning and development. Cybersecurity, as we all know, as in listening to many of these talks today, is continually evolving. And actually training your teams to be able to deal with that change is paramount. Encouraging certifications like ethical hacking and cybersecurity in the cloud can help set aside time for teams to invest in themselves. This can also be done for looking at emerging threats and ensuring that they stay sharp and adaptable with any change. Encouraging cross-functional collaboration. Security is not a one-person problem. As we all know, we work in many different teams that are for everybody's problem. We cannot work in isolation, and we need to work defensively together. I always encourage a purple team mindset, which brings in security and, of course, development to bring together to have a more dynamic approach. I also highlight that actually our security teams are normally the bad guys. Understanding our persona outside of our team is paramount too. I would always encourage cross-functional information going across from not only my side, but also people that are in the field and users. So user development is important throughout our teams. When we look at fostering a culture of innovation and experimentation, it's really key to have those areas of innovation days, where they're not just looking at what they do day to day, but they're also looking at outside their normal framework. So this could be looking at new tool sets and understanding that we need to fail fast. We can only learn from what we fail against. If we only succeed, do we actually improve? And lastly, prioritizing our mental health and work-life balance. It is such a high-pressure teams that we normally work in, and the development work has to be with practice of our own self too. High-pressure work and burnout is a true risk within our company and within our teams. Mental health resources, as well as flexible schedules, and we all know that we're coming close to Christmas, so actually work time off is also important too. A balanced and supported team normally becomes more resilient and therefore is effective in the long run. By creating supported teams with growth, so they know where they belong, but also what they can achieve, is developing a team that is stronger for defense and therefore be able to deal with whatever comes next. So for me, I was in infrastructure for many years before I did go into cybersecurity. And I felt it was paramount for me to make sure that the teams that I worked with in the wider organization knew what we were trying to achieve. With that in mind, I was able to fix more stuff and become more secure because I had those relationships built. We cannot deal with the immense amount of security issues that we have on our own. Pruning for efficiency. Like it says, we need to remove what no longer serves us. Pruning away dead branches when it comes to gardening helps plants to thrive. Cutting out what no longer serves us in regards to technology can help declutter our environment, which also, if it's that cluttered, can make it harder for us to protect our most critical assets. We've all experienced the different storms of late. Imagine that as part of your security. You've not dealt with those branches that are hanging, and therefore they're going to create more of an issue from your security point of view. So when we look at this, we should look at removing those outdated systems and software. I know it's easier said than done. This, of course, reduces the number of vulnerabilities, and therefore your attack surface significantly reduces. We all know that there are some political issues in regards to those. I have a tree at the bottom of my garden that has a tree protection order. That's the politics in regarding gardening, and therefore we need to go through change control. Again, removing those aspects in regards to security, you have to bring in change control in there. We would all like to fix everything under the sun, but that's just simply not possible. When we then look at reducing that unnecessary complexity, we are all human. But if we have no efficiency, that is actually the enemy of what we want to achieve. Overlapping tooling, we all have too many tools, or convoluted processes, unfortunately business has those quite a lot, can lead to confusions within our security teams and wider businesses. Those can lead to mistakes, and we all make those. But streamlining these processes and consolidating the tools in your shed can help you to reduce that confusion. So making sure that your teams know exactly what they need to do and how they can achieve that. Lastly, reducing those permissions. Principle of least privilege has been around since the dot. But the problem is that is one of the most difficult ones to unpick. Closing off those access can reduce your attack vectors significantly. And it will also impact the reduction of your internal threats. I've talked about previously about items inside of a tree being an internal threat. But actually, if you reduce your access permissions, that is significantly going to improve those too. So there are some key tools. No, don't worry, I'm not going into my vendor hat. But the key tools for pruning, for example, you should look at a decent EDR solution. There are many on the market, but this is the one piece of solution that will help you determine what is actually out there and what is being used, especially when you're looking at specific users that have administrative permissions. They should be tracking those. Also, access management tools. Knowing who has access to what and feeding that information in is key to understand where do we need to reduce, what do they actually need to get to, and how we can improve those. So, for example, when I worked for a financial services, we had significant amount of outdated systems. and they were spread throughout the environment. Again, there were some TPOs out there that was stopping me from removing those altogether. So what we had to do was isolate those. They were still key foundational purpose, but I needed to make sure that they were segregated themselves. I then also brought in the fact that we need to limit the permissions to those outdated systems to protect them further, applying a least privilege to who actually needs to access them. We reduced those attack surfaces. I improved the communication because I'd already done work previously on my access in regards to those and communication within multiple teams to then have a more secure attack surface. So, key takeaway from here, your pruning for efficiency isn't just about cutting back. It's about creating a focus, managing that and securing that environment where the focus on assets truly matters. And actually, your users are those assets too. Building resilience. We need to weather those storms, and there are a few. So when I look at it from a gardening lens, we have young plants. Those young plants need to be protected. And to protect those, I would generally put them in a greenhouse. Again, not always great in a storm, but they can recover from any access that they have. So, for example, I have my young plants. I'm overwintering them this year. I put them in a greenhouse so they don't get attacked by slugs. Wait, they still do. But it's one of those things that it's stopping some of the access, some of the issues that I'm going to get when it comes to planting. When we look at this, it's not about defense. It's about being ready to respond when we talk about resilience in cybersecurity. So it's not about knowing everything and protecting everything, but it's about being able to bounce back because attacks happen. When we look at that, we need to implement a good backup and recovery system, and it needs to be fit for purpose. Spent a few years looking at different backup and recovery systems for a solution that I used to manage. It was my greenhouse. I protected it. It was able to bounce back if I had a storm. No, it wasn't glass. But I made sure it was robust enough. When we look at backup recovery systems, they have to protect what is necessary from a data position, but it's able to be my safety net. Okay, I've got all of my data, it's nice and safe, but I need to be able to pull that back into action when something happens. So it needs to be regular. We need to make sure that my data is kept up to date. It's able to be automated as much as possible, and then it be able to be recovered. And so when we do that, it's recovering from a small downtime. But it needs to be practiced. If it's not fit for purpose, you're never going to know unless you test it. When we also look at this, we need to look at having a practiced incident response plan, or DR is another way of putting it. It needs to be ready. You need to be ready for what is going to happen. And it can't be just a document. We all have many, many different processes throughout our business, but it needs to be more than just a document. It needs to be practiced and tested regularly. Platforms can help streamline and automate these processes, but you need to be able to know how you use them and effectively with your team. They need to be able to be actively involved in the process and then know how to implement those. We need to be as prepared as possible because platforms can only do so much and we need to be able to work together. The faster we can contain an issue, the less issue it's going to be for the systems and businesses that we have here. We then need to really monitoring for near to real time. I always say near to because nothing is perfect. For early detection. When we talk about this, early detection is key, and it is a differentiator between a catastrophic issue and we can recover from that. Real-time monitoring and alerting that is actually usable can help identify what threats we need to deal with and escalate them. SIEM products are available to help you with that, ingesting the data, But it's the same as garbage in, garbage out. You need to know what is necessary for your environment to be able to be monitored, but also the playbooks that go alongside those. It's all well and good knowing that there's a problem, but if it doesn't alert and it doesn't have a playbook associated with those, it's going to not work effectively. Spending all this money without any playbooks is really a bad place to be. So, again, industry. I was part of a team that was responsible for incident response at times. We did not have an incident response plan that was practiced because, breaches don't really happen, right? We had backup systems. Unfortunately, the backup system that I was responsible for in regards to my product, it was running not as designed. And again, like I say, backup systems need to be thought about, but in what you're wanting to back up. If the database is active, you can't really back up a database in regards to those, which I learned the hard way. So making sure that the teams are available for those and they know where they go, how it's dealt with, as well as non-call. So resilience is being ready for the unexpected. Strong backups, tested response plans, and real-time monitoring are building blocks in building this resilience. We cannot recover without those fundamentals and that foundation. Reward. We all like reward. And in regards to when we look at gardening, it is about our harvest, right? So we're harvesting the season, we're harvesting for success. And it is a moment to reflect on what's gone good and what hasn't gone so well, depending on where you're planting stuff, what seasons have been about. There's been a lot of rain so far. So it's a time to know and celebrate. We can identify different areas in regards to this, but we need to know what we're measuring. So we need to have those KPIs or measuring those metrics. You can measure things like incident response plan if you're part of a SOC, threat detection rate, vulnerability remediation, how many criticals that you have, depending on what your business process is. And you need to have a tooling there to help you visualize that. What does good look like for you and your teams? This also is very good to really drill down in which bits do we need to improve as well. What works, what doesn't. You should also look at conducting, from our incident response, post-incident response analysis. Okay, so we need to work out what the root cause was. That should be simple, right? But it's not always the case, and it's not done also effectively enough. When you have that root cause, you need to be able to then diagnose and have those valuable lessons learned. When we're talking about it from a software vendor, which is where I have been previously, we have incidents, stuff happens, but we have to give the users that key factor. What are we going to do better next time, or what actually happened? Post-incident response tooling is also very good in this regard. It's able to help you to dissect, evaluate, and help you to know what you did well and what you need to improve. But also it helps us to know what weaknesses are out there. And so you can then be stronger and the next time that hopefully you might not need to do this. Lastly, we need to celebrate the wins and encouraging team growth. I always have the phrase of you win together, but you also lose together. And it's knowing that cyber is a challenging industry to be in. And it's essential to understand and to recognize the efforts that teams place within you. When it's successful, it can prevent threats. And when it's not, yes, stuff happens and you have to be able to deal with that too. Acknowledging these wins doesn't just boost morale within the teams, but it also reinforces what best practice looks like. And for the teams to know and to move forward from there. When I was in industry, some of the key indicators were vulnerabilities. That's where it's my little seat where I used to be. And the team metrics were, how many vulnerabilities did I find? Am I seeing everything? And are people patching? Of course, when we look at that, they are quite simple. They are black and white. But again, post-analysis of those would be, are you scanning everywhere? How do I know, am I scanning everywhere? And then the celebrating of the wins with the wider team, with my cross-functional communication, is celebrating you've done some patching and we are compliant. So harvesting for success isn't just about measuring, honestly, but it's about continuously improving from those metrics that you find. It's reflection of what went well, what didn't, identifying how we can do better and be better. We in cybersecurity need to build a strategy to understand that it's not just about being resilient, but it's being adaptive to any of those. Continuous improvement. So we are coming full circle. So in a garden, it's never done. I've got many different community gardens that I help with, hence why I bring my cybersecurity focus today. But they're never fully finished. I've still got to go and look at them every season. And, we've had a few different seasons this year. But every season becomes a different challenge. And there's always room for growth, whether that is doing additional weeding, putting in some different mulch, understanding the soil and how that's coming on is exactly the same within cybersecurity. Continuous improvement because it needs to evolve. So some key areas for continuous improvement would be looking at your VM, so your vulnerability management assessment. It's a key area because we all know that vulnerabilities are ever evolving. Threats come and go. 0 days are evolving every single day, it feels like at times. But if you do not have a strategy for how you are going to find these threats, they are always going to be there. So understanding, having a method that actually works for the business, not just what the vendor says, because it's cross-functional. It needs to be able to be ingested and digested from many different points. Auditing. It is a horrible word to some people, but auditing from a security point of view is, again, paramount for continuous improvements. Audits do change, and our standards change on a very frequent basis, but it's like having a review of your garden. An audit can uncover inefficiencies as well as things that aren't working well or that are security that you don't realize that there's a problem. So it's important to absorb that information, be able to be compliant and do compliance to be able to empower your team and better the business. And finally, again, encouraging a culture of learning and adaptability. It's not just tooling. It has to be a mindset shift. Your teams need to realize that they are part of a culture of security that is learning and it needs to adapt. So within all of those three, you can see not only how you find, but also how you continuously go around in this journey. So again, when I was in industry, I was the implementation of our vulnerability management program, including security audits, which were not always as easy to rectify. But it was about team learning. I knew how my system worked. I taught people and put in place practices and documentation of how they could do my job. Because again, not everybody's in the same seat for many years. But you have to be able to learn from others. I knew that I knew my stuff, but I didn't know always how it impacted others. And that continuous improvement from myself and from my team meant that we had a very secure environment from a security point of view. So it is not a set and forget. By regularly updating, reviewing, and learning, we ensure our defenses are secure. And we are being proactive and not reactive, because we need to be one step ahead of those evolving threats. So, I'm going to wrap it up. I've got a couple more, so don't worry. But to wrap it up, we need to bring it all together, the core principles. So nurturing growth, investing in teams, investing in technology that suits, pruning, cutting away and streamlining, cutting away the things that do not need to be in place, cutting away items that are insecure, and then putting in processes that are going to rectify those, building resilience, prepare for the unexpected and most of the time the expected, and to understand how you can move forward. Harvest. When we look at harvest, we are measuring, we are reflecting, and we are celebrating. And they're the key areas. And then finally, continuous improvement. This is how you evolve. Evolve for just not one person in their individual seats, but together. You celebrate the wins together, you win and you lose together. So these principles, like I said, do not work in isolation. They support each other to develop an ecosystem that strengthens each other. When we nurture, prune, build and harvest, and adapt continuously, we create a strategy that's not just resilience, but it's ready to grow and withstand whatever challenges come before us. We're coming to the end of our journey, our growth together, I suppose, and I want to reflect. There are a few things that when you're nurturing a garden or protecting digital environments, the real work happens behind the scenes, quietly and consistently, and often without immediate results. We don't get celebrated often. We only get celebrated when something happens most of the time. So strong roots. There's 2 quotes. Strong roots. Strong roots grow in quiet seasons. Resilience is built before the storm. Preparation today ensures protection tomorrow. From this, I understand that roots grow before anything else. When we look at the storms that we've had the last couple of weeks, those strong roots that we put down and we nurture help us to build branches and trunk that is going to support our ecosystem of our business. When we stand tall within a tree, the strength is in what we have already done before us. And when we talk about quiet seasons, this is in preparation. The roots that anchor us down are potentially protecting us from a ransom attack or a data breach. And they don't grow overnight. You're not expecting your teams to be able to pick up tools and run with them instantly. It's continuous efforts. We're continuously doing vulnerability scanning, security audits, patching, data. And they're built long, long before we have a breach, hopefully. So my second quote, preparation today ensures protection tomorrow. And it's essential for both gardening and cybersecurity. When I plant a seed or a bulb, I don't expect it to bloom instantaneously. So we're preparing the soil, which is nurturing growth, and trusting the work that I do today is going to pay off in the future. Similarly, when we invest, we are preparing. So think about your own garden, whether it's your team, your systems, or your approach to cybersecurity. What roots are you going to be preparing for your quiet season? And what seeds are you planting today to ensure protection tomorrow? Resilience, growth, and security are not built in a day. They are a result of your preparation, your consistency, and a mindset of continuous improvement. So I want to carry that mindset forward because the work that we do today helps us to shape a secure future. Thank you. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. What seeds are you planting today to ensure a secure digital future tomorrow? I want to thank you so much for listening and your time and attention, because it's getting on a little bit now. And I'd love to continue this conversation, so feel free to connect. That is a safe QR code. And let's grow a stronger cybersecurity strategy together. if there are any questions, feel free. It's a bit bizarre, I know, so feel free. Yes?
So, thank you. You built a lovely metaphor. I am working in a large organization where security is very much on the side.
Yeah.
And so I wondered if you had any tips, like kind of practical tips, in terms of getting security to be more integrated and trying to change the team.
Yeah. Perspective. Yeah. So just to refresh, the gentleman's asked how a segregated security team can be more integrated within a wider organisation. And I experienced this firsthand. Communication is really key. Transparency is even more key in regards to this. So we'll forget about the gardening right now. But if you have key stakeholders, so you have your key players that are needing to be involved in any conversation when you're talking about security, inviting them in, getting them involved early as possible helps break down sometimes what I would find is anxiety, because we are the big bad guys generally when we're talking about security. We're going to stop a lot of things. Inviting them in, listening and feeding back to them your thoughts about the situation, but actively listening to what they are needing out of it can help that. Because I was in infrastructure for many years, I could talk the same language. You will be able to talk the same language as a technical person, and a non-technical person, you just need to build a metaphor that they understand. Breaking down the barriers of that communication. Once you've got it and you've built that rapport with them, they trust you. And it's all about building trust. So I hope that helps to understand getting under the hood of who they are, where their pain comes from, can really help to build that resilience within the teams. That cross-functional, that's why I put it in. It's amazing when you start bringing in cross-functional communication, because you have that foundation for a very long time. If there's nothing else, I can let you go.